Born Primitive Outdoor is proud to partner with Montana Knife Company, Marsupial Gear, Evolution Outdoors, Sheep Feet, and Capture Gear. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsors. Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday the 24th, and I'm just back from my second trip in for elk, and it's been a pretty slow year so far. I was just getting kind of cranked up. But before I get into the round 2 podcast of elk hunting, I wanted to go over something. It's a little bit difficult for me to talk about, but yeah, I got a couple really close friends from back in Oregon through high school. We were, the Three Musketeers, Three Stooges, Three Amigos, however you want to look at it. But, one of those guys was, best man at my wedding, my first wedding, with my baby's mama, that wedding. And, he'd been, struggling off and on for a while. And, these two guys, but this specific guy, was with me pretty much every day of my life through, grade school and high school. And obviously, lifelong brotherhood type thing. And on the 20th, I had gotten a text message from my football coach that just said, "Hey, Aaron, not good news in Oregon. Call me if you can." And I don't have service where I'm elk hunting unless I climb up to this one specific peak. And I never, I didn't really think about what it would be. And my buddy, one of the ones I was just talking about anyway, had called me like the day before, or the day I was hiking in, I guess. It would have been the day I was going in, and left a voicemail. And again, I spotty service, so I had texted him back, "Hey dude, I'm hunting and my service is horrible, but I'll call you, when I get off the mountain." And unfortunately, I guess the next day he had taken his own life. And so I had actually, when I got the text from my coach, had messaged my mom asking what was going on, and she had told me what happened. So I'm not talking about this for pity or anything. This is more of a buddy check thing. Like, obviously, I had talked him off the ledge before, as well as my buddy Jason and I were very good friends with this guy. And, he was struggling, and I should have known better. I should have called him on the sat phone. I should have done more than text message, which is obviously on me. So, check on your buddies. And life is very precious and very fragile. And, this is one of the funniest, nicest guys you could ever meet. And obviously one very resourceful guy, could fix anything. It was amazing at everything he did. He just had trouble fixing himself. So I'm only talking about this, and I went back and forth for the last several days, or 4 or 5 days, I guess, going over if I should talk about this. But I think it's important. I'm not doing this for pity or sympathy, but make sure and check on your friends. If they're struggling, do everything you can, to help them, because you just don't know when, one of the days may be their last. And so, I'm not going to lie, I'm struggling with this a lot, as close as he was to me, as well as obviously not being who I should have been and calling him back. I should have known better. I should have climbed up top, got service. I should have called him on a sat phone. I should have done more than text him. I just didn't know, but I guess I kind of knew he'd been struggling. So yeah, check on your buddies if you need help. Reach out to me, obviously, at any time. I know a lot of you guys and gals, specifically guys, do and have reached out to me when you're struggling. I'm pretty much an open book when it comes to whatever issues I have. And this was a tough one. It's tougher today than it was when I found out. And so I think what I'm going to do, Justin and I and Jason, we did everything, together. So I think I'm just going to go back in on the first solo and kind of have a hunt with just my buddy and I, so to speak, going solo and try to get it done, then and take some, time off for myself, I guess, or be by myself for a while. So anyway, so I already said it about 14 times, but yeah, check on your friends, be a good human, be better than I was. I certainly should have called him back, and at the very least, if I couldn't have talked him out of something, I certainly would have at least got to talk to him, one more time. So, yeah, I'm going to move on from that before I cry like a little bitch. But, so that's a horrible way to start a podcast. When we were back in there, hunting, I went, the first go round, I think we came out on the 9th and decided we'd take a few days off and wait for the, elk to get going a little bit more. I went back in on the 14th. I actually, Mishka, my girlfriend, went in with me. The idea in the morning I'd hunt, by myself and come back, midday. And then, weather depending, or if she wanted to head back out in the afternoon. We're already like 4 miles in where we backed into, give or take, I'd say 4. Chris ended up killing a bull, which I'll go into that. And we were actually pushing 6 miles in. But anyway, so the first morning when I was in there, weather storm came in and it was snowing and snaining, which is like snow and rain, big wet flakes. And I climbed, down into this hole. I got into a herd, and really big bull. I didn't know it at the time. It was the game camera that showed me that. But I mean, sounded big. Little ones can sound big. But just couldn't get him to commit. And, it's one of those things like you'll hear people talk about. You get within 80 yards, do this dominant bugle, they'll charge in. Sometimes that works. And sometimes, depending on the time of the year, it doesn't, or I just didn't bugle dominant enough. But, he kind of did that. Joel Turner talks about it, the bull calling cows bugle, kind of like herding them up. And, didn't run off. He just walked into the timber. And, obviously it was something I could have done wrong as well. But not any great opportunities, obviously, at shots at that point. We're in thicker timber. And I tracked. When I say tracked, you could hear them. It wasn't like I was following tracks the whole time. Quite a ways farther than I really should have gone. Ended up going up and over a ridge line, and I could hear him in the dark timber below. The wind was bad, and I circled around. And to hike back, this took like 4 hours. Maybe not 4, 3.5 hours of this total from the moment when I had kind of snuck in on him. When I say snuck in, I heard the cows, and when I snuck in is when I got close enough to where I probably should have cow called, but I ended up ripping off, a bugle in hopes he'd come in, and he was pretty close when I bugled, but he didn't come in. Ended up following him, trying to get on him. Had some other bulls bugle, but then it hiked back to camp and kind of shut up after that. I hit some boot tracks coming back to camp that were not mine, so I knew there were some other hunters in the area. And then it was pretty dang slow on the 16th, 17th, and 18th. On the 16th, in the evening, I had a bull respond and come up the valley, up the hill towards us, but it was too late. And by the time it got to where we probably could have snuck in and got a shot or called it in, when we looped down and around to get to it, it just got dark. And so went back to camp. The next morning, and I'm mixing this up a little bit actually. But anyway, I went, whatever day it was, a different direction than where I was just talking about. I went to a different area. And that morning, Mishka had actually heard, she was at camp, several bugles. She described what sounded like an estrus call. And, when I went the other direction, and I did not get into any elk that morning. So there was actually that night that she heard those bugles. That's where we went to that night, where I had that bull respond. I kind of got my days mixed up. So that night is when I got a bull to respond right before dark. He did come to us, but where we circled around to get to him, it just got dark. So the next morning I'm like, all right, I'm going to get back in there and try to kill this bull. And I had a pretty good idea which bull it was, but I wasn't, you're never sure. So I snuck back in there in the morning, and it's just one dick kicking after another. I hadn't found out about my friend yet, but hunting had been slow. Things just don't pan out sometimes when you're hunting. But I had been on, at that point, I think in the last 60 days, I'd been on the ground like 45 of them between scouting and the sheep, guiding the sheep hunters, and then, elk hunting or whatever, which I'm not complaining about that, but it does wear on your body. I'm not getting any younger. We're reaching 50 here. So that next morning I snuck in, over to the area where Mishka had heard the bugles. I got in, I didn't hear any calling, and I found a cow, not a moo cow, a cow elk, that had been, it looked like shot. I flipped it over. It was a pretty good sized cow, and it looked like it was liver gut, and it wasn't very old. So what I'm assuming is when, Mishka had heard them earlier, the morning, the day before that morning, there was hunters that got in there and, wounded one, didn't find it. And so, and there was a lot of tracks and sign in there. And again, the elk, that cow had just been hit recently. It was less than 24 hours old. Animals had barely gotten to it. So I'm like, well, and so I saw pretty fresh tracks, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to work farther away over into this darker timber, and ended up calling in 4 hunters. And, I'm quite a ways in, so that was a bummer. I mean, it's public land, right? This is a general tag. And I had 2 coming from the north and 2 coming from the south. And when I say that, I had 2 hunters come in about 300 yards out to my right, and 2 hunters come in about 300 yards, 200 yards to my left. I took photos of them. Not that I only did it, honestly, to show my buddies. I was like, shit, there's a lot of hunters back here. So I don't know if they were partnered up together, but they certainly weren't on the trail that I was on. But there was another trail that you could take to get into the area that I was, so I'm sure they took that trail. And so that kind of shits on your parade, right? I was like, fucking dead cow, 4 hunters. Like, I'm going to have to, remaneuver here and figure something else out. So, the 19th was my last day to hunt in this unit. The way my tag works is it's good until the 19th. On the 20th, if you drew that tag, if you put in for it, you can hunt with a rifle from the 20th to the end of the month. And then my tag, because I didn't draw, I have a general tag, is good October 1st, which I'm going back in like I discussed a little bit ago. So on the 19th, I guess, Chris came in, and Mishka went back on the 18th. So she hiked back on the 18th. I hunted that morning, hunted that night. Didn't really get into anything. Again, and the bulls weren't firing off like crazy. Sat on a water hole for like 7 hours, which is really horrible for me to try to do. Anyway, that night, the 19th, it did start to fire off. Chris and I got into 4 or 5 bulls, 1 big one. One I saw that was really big. And when we first got in there, and it's kind of hard to explain, but where we dropped in, we actually heard something move in the timber. Chris heard it because I'm deaf, and Chris started calling. He called in 2 cows. One was maybe 8 to 12 yards. The other one was probably 16 to 20. I went to full draw, but I didn't want to shoot a cow. I'd already passed up 1 cow I probably should have shot, and a raghorn, and I just didn't want to shoot a cow. I'm trying to shoot a big bull or a decent bull. And the bull cracked off again. He bugled a couple of times, but same thing. He just kind of gathered his cows up and moved into the timber. And this is the exact same spot within a couple hundred yards of where I was that first night that I was in. So, I mean, it's a hole that holds elk. You don't want to blow them out of there. So, this was my last shot. So that one went up and over the ridge line, and we're like, okay, let's not even try it. Let's not push them anymore. So we sat down and just started cow calling, and bulls started firing off and coming in. As it ended up, we should have just stayed where we were, but we went to go after one, and then another one closer, bugled, took a left turn, went to go after that one. Then one bugled literally where we just were, within 50 yards. So I looped back to that one, and I mean, I could just smell rutting bulls when I got back there. And I was like, man, I would have seen them in every direction, but this way. So I went up to this little ridge going in up and over into this next little draw, And I got a look at him, and he was a cranker. And he's 340. I mean, for general tag, it's big to me. And I say 340, around 340, 335 to 350, a lot like that bull I killed a couple years ago. Good bull. And did he have a herd or not? I don't know. It was weird because I don't know if he's not the herd bull. The bull that we had just gotten into before that had all the cows must be bigger. So I got a good look at him. I cow called a few times, but I think the direction he was going, he was on the trail of the herd that we were on just before. And he wasn't running away. But it looked like he had probably come down to our calls and figured out we weren't the herd, and then went after the herd to either go beat the shit out of that other bull or grab a cow. But then we had another bull respond. Anyway, action we wanted, what I'd been hoping for the last 19 days. But that was the end of my season, so to speak, for, until the 1st. So we could see where we could set up for Chris with the rifle, because Chris has brought his rifle in. So the next morning, the 20th, we hiked in and kind of finagled our way into this cliff edge where we sat all day, and obviously had pushed the elk in, and they didn't push the elk out. They didn't come back in. Now we could hear elk a little bit that morning until about 10:30, which is a good sign. The later they bugle, they're getting fired up. And but nothing ended up coming in. We didn't call. We're on a cliff edge, and just hoping a bull would come in. So we worked our way, back to camp late that night. Got back pretty late, and that's when things, really started firing off. Bulls were bugling all night long. One right beside camp. Everything you hope for. Next morning, I was like, surely to God, we're going to kill one this morning. We had 4 or 5 bulls bugling around, and and I'm like, as you can imagine, I had really, was very excited about this elk hunt. I obviously life changes everything else. Like I've been like not as enthusiastic about hunting for the last couple of years as I had been before. I like guiding, I like photography. I like to hunt, but not that drive that I once had. And I scouted this area out. I probably went in there 8 different times, and it just was not panning out like I'd hoped, but I wasn't going to give up on it. Right. But what I've been hoping for kicked off that night of the 19th, 20th, slow, right? But the 21st, that morning, firing off like crazy. So we never got a bull with all the elk screaming around us to poke his head out, right? I got a look. One bull looped around when I was behind Chris calling, and I ran forward to get Chris. I didn't know how big he was exactly because I saw him through, I didn't hang out for a while. I was trying to get Chris to get back up there, but it looked like a good bull from what I could see, and nothing happened. And so, I think that was, the 21st, and that evening of the 21st was just not great. We ran into 3 other hunters right by camp. They were bugling all day long. But that night, we were laughing because they were bugling all day long. And I say laughing, it's just not something I generally do. But then we heard a gunshot. I don't know if it was from them, and I'm kind of making jokes well, maybe we should go stand on a field and bugle all day long because somebody shot one. But that next morning, the 22nd, I mean, motivation was definitely going downhill. Mentally, I was not, I'm not going to lie. I'm glad Chris was there when I found out the news that I had talked about earlier. It was on the 20th, but I was already not, I'm not sleeping well to begin with. And that really, it fucked me up. I'm not going to lie. It still fucked me up. So I'm kind of dealing with that. Dealing with the fact I suck as an elk hunter. I haven't killed one, passing up elk that I maybe shouldn't have. Anybody that's hunted, you have all kinds of crap going through your brain. I'm a failure. I suck at elk hunting. How is this? I've killed so many elk and I can't get one down, and Jesus, what's going on? And just my buddy, all of that was piling on me. So that morning of the 22nd, I'm laying in my tent thinking, is Chris wanting to go home? Are we going to come back at it later on? And Chris came over to the tent, and we were like, yeah, we might as well just do a loop. If it sucks again, let's head out for a couple days. And I certainly, needed to sleep in a bed, get some good sleep, shower, make some phone calls, with the issues that I discussed, handle some work stuff. And so we started to make a big loop, and it was pretty slow when we made this loop, and we were getting pretty far away from camp. And this again is on the morning of the 22nd, but we were hearing bugles. And so, we're heading to, at this point, we're 1.5 miles away from camp, but we do have a couple, 2 to 3 bulls firing off. But we've got to go through we ended up finding a better route, but at that time, horrible deadfall, just pixie sticks, pickup sticks, Lincoln logs just piled on top of each other. And Chris and I are looking back at each other like, this better be worth it, like shit. So we ended up getting about 2 miles from camp, and it was funny because, Chris was cow calling. I didn't call, right? When I say I didn't call, when we got up and set up from where this bull that he ended up killing was bugling, initially it wasn't the response that you would get knowing the bull's hot and he's coming. Like, it wasn't that, what he was bugling back wasn't that type of bugle, but Chris was doing more of a lost calf call, and he was responding. He was getting closer, and I told Chris that, hey, Chris, I'm not going to do shit. Like, what you're doing is working. I'm just going to film, okay? He's like, yep, because that call, and it was more of a lost calf call, but that's what, it was drawing him in. And so I didn't Esther's call, I didn't bugle, I didn't do shit. Just had the phone and the binos ready. And the bull closed from 450 to 350, 300. And I'm like, man, he's coming. He's going to come to us. And Chris is like, hell yeah, Chris is ready. He's got the gun ready. Bull comes out. I got it on film. Bull comes out. Chris puts a great shot on it, like 229 yards, I think is what he said. Bull went down in we looked at the film, 9 seconds or something. And so, the weather was coming in a bit, like it was cloudy, great for photos and video. Obviously we were very, very happy. It made me feel a lot better. I was already down in the dumps. One, hadn't killed a bull, but far more because of my buddies. So this was a pick me up. And I'm trying to, I'm not going to bullshit. Like I'm trying not to, jerk a tear in front of Chris. Like I, would be fine for an hour, and then I'd start to think of something my buddy and I did when we were kids, or whatever, just the shit you can imagine, and just kind of choke up. And I had a breakdown in my tent that day before, and so I was really struggling. And so this was really good that Chris had gotten a bull. So we start cutting up the bull, getting it quartered, and so now we're like, okay, what are we going to do to get this thing out? Because we're at this point 6 miles in. So we had one plan that was a good plan. And then Chris was like, man, why don't we actually hang the bull up here, work our way back to camp, load up everything in our camp, hike to the truck, drive the truck around to the other trailhead, and then hike in, get the meat, come back out. I'm like, man, that's a good plan. I think that's going to work. I like that one better. So we did part of that plan we get back to camp. We got the bull deboned, hung up, all that kind of stuff. Got back to camp, and on the hike out, which is 4 miles, it usually takes us 1.5 hours to 2 hours, depending on if we stop and fuck off, how fast we're going, the weather, all that stuff. So holy shit, we are almost to camp, or almost to the truck, and a storm comes in. Hold on, I gotta get a drink here. So this storm comes in, and it's like dark clouds, hail and snow. And Chris and I were like, let's come back tomorrow. I'm like, yep, I think that is a great plan. That meat is going to be A-okay. It's cold as hell. We weren't too worried about bears, but there's grizzlies in the area, so it's always a concern. But it's a risk that you obviously take when you're backpack hunting. And it wasn't, we probably could have got in there and got everything out. We would have both had a significant amount of weight in our back during a hellacious storm. So we opted, we're going to go back the next day. So we drove home, showered the norm, headed back out the next day. Mishka came, went up that other trail, and we ended up, Mishka carried the back straps and tenderloins. Chris and I each got a front and a rear, in the head. So, we were pushing 80, 100 pounds, I guess, each in our packs. Heavy, but not ungodly, but definitely, you felt it. But we got it out, and, everything was super chill. Ran into a lot of hunters on that trail, horse, a lot of people on horseback. And so, on my end, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back in on the first. I left some of my gear in there. And I'm, debating if I'm going to go back in with a rifle or not, or go in with my bow. I'm leaning more towards, the rifle. I'm obviously more well known for bow hunting than anything, but I, with the later part of the season, and I really want to kill this one, I guess 2 specific bulls. And so I think I'm going to bring the rifle, back in, and I don't mind picking up the rifle. But I'm going to go back in solo probably for 7 days. And again, it's mentally or whatever going to be probably good for me. And, kind of be just me and me talking to my buddy that's gone to the hunting grounds in the sky. And so I think that'll probably be good for me to do that. I don't mind being alone. And Chris, it's Chris Horne was the guy that I was hunting with, and he's the fucking greatest dude you could ask for. He's like, hey man, whatever happens, I'll get in there to help you out. I'll bring a buddy. He's got other people with horses if I kill one way in there. So, obviously good support on that end. Mishka's the same way. She said she'd help out. And so I'm going to go back in with 7 days of gear. Might bring the bow, but I'm leaning more towards the rifle. I'll decide, kind of get my head space and timing a little bit better, I hope, because I'm definitely struggling pretty badly now, and hopefully put a big bull down. So, they should be cranking pretty damn good by the time I get back in there. I'm not sure if I do bring the rifle. I'm going back and forth between the 6.5 PRC and the 300 PRC. These are from, Grant at Viking Armament. And I've shot a lot of animals with the 6.5 PRC. I've shot a few with the 300, but I'm going to probably go back in. Kind of strategy at first is there's a couple overlooks where I can see about 600 yards in. And there's timber and aspens. I mean, you can't see everything, obviously, but, where I've got a good overwatch. I really don't want to take a 600-yard shot. I do. I have last night, I messaged Pinch to make sure I didn't screw it up. I got the speeds of both guns. I just got a set of EL ranges from Corbin. So Corbin, shout out to Corbin's Archery and Corbin for getting me those. And I put the speed and all the data, and I think I did it correctly in both the rifles. So today I'm going to set targets out on my property here out to 600 and just make sure that I didn't screw anything up as far as when I range, when it says whatever 9 MOA, that it's on, that I didn't enter any of the data wrong for both rifles. And that's probably where I'll make my decision as far as which rifle to take, if I take a rifle, on which one's shooting best. The 300 PRC that they built for me is I'm shooting a 225 grain Hornady ELD, and I'm shooting on the 6.5 PRC 147 grain ELD. They're both doing 2870 to 2900 feet per second, I think, on the chrono. I gotta go look. I entered all that shit in last night. I got Maven scopes. I can't remember the model. It's their higher end scopes. I really like the Maven scopes I've got on there. But yeah, I'm gonna shoot today, see how they group, see how they're shooting, make sure I didn't screw anything up on the data that I entered. I shoot offhand pretty damn well, which is handy for jump shooting. So I shoot the 6.5 PRC a little bit better offhand, just how it's weighted. Obviously the 300's a bit heavier, but I'm going to figure it out, what I'm going to take, whether it be that or my bow. I'm going to go back in the first, and then, I'm planning on staying in 6 or 7 days. Now, Derek Wolf is coming out to hunt with Ryan Rotier. I think he's traveling on the 7th, and he's going to hunt on the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, I think, with Rotier for mule deer. And I would like to be there for that if I can be. It's a little bit of a time constraint as far as that goes. But if I don't make it, it's not like Ryan can't handle himself with his guys with Derek, but it'd be good to hang out with Derek and the crew. And I'm not sure if I know Jerry, my partner in crime, Shaw Photolab Studios, he's going to come out and film, get some B-roll. I don't know if Lane Walter's another great human. I don't know if Lane's, he usually films for Derek. If he's coming out, I got to figure that out today for that mule deer hunt. But, as far as on my end, I'm really just trying to shoot a 6x6 over 300 inches, and it's definitely been a struggle this year, far more than one I thought it would be, or really far more than I normally have issues with elk hunting. But it's a new area. I've scouted a lot. It is a good area, just fired up slow. I don't mind bringing the rifle, but I love bow hunting so much. It is hard to leave the bow behind, but I also, it is easier with a rifle. And so in some ways, again, I'm kind of going back and forth on that. I know what my buddy that I was talking about before, I know what he would say. He would say, bring the rifle, dipshit. And he was a bow hunter and a gun hunter. But so anyway, it's only 30 minutes into this podcast, but that is kind of what's been going on. I've definitely been struggling a bit, again, mentally. Also been struggling trying to kill an elk. So it's been a little bit rough year, but that happens. But I can't thank Chris Horne and Mishka enough, going in, hunting with me. It's just, that was a big, help, both super supportive, and that was, again, pretty rough on me. So it's been fun hanging out with them. So going back in on the first, well, probably not the first. How many days are in this month? I think it's 30. So I'm probably going in the 29th, and then I'll just kind of scout around, listen, whatever, the 30th, and then hopefully, I can see if there's other hunters in there, if I got to change my plan up. And then I'll go in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th for sure. Hopefully I'll have one dead by then. And you never know. I might just give up, say fuck it, and shoot a smaller elk, but I'm planning, and I've been holding out to try to shoot a big one. So we'll see what happens. Above and beyond that, again, buddy check. Check on your friends when they're struggling. Do everything you can, to help them out. And I've talked about the issues specifically that men have, suicide, just life on the podcast before, in some way. I mean, obviously I don't mind talking about it. I've gotten a lot of good feedback that I'm not afraid to open up and talk about things like this. I've seen some hate from it or whatever, and that's just life. But I definitely think that I probably should focus more on maybe getting some specialists on the podcast every now and then. Suicide is a horrible thing. It seems to be really horrible, and males, right? It seems to be worse. And this is not the first time I've had a friend commit suicide, but this is definitely the closest friend. This guy was like my brother. And it's shitty, and I would like to do my part in helping out as much as I can with people struggling, whether that be they reach out to me and we shoot the shit, or I get some specialists on here to talk about it every now and then. I think that's a good idea. But whether or not I could have talked him out of it, or I just would have got to hear from him one more time. Who knows? But I know I could have done better. I could have been a better friend. And, I had invited him to come live with me before. And I could, you always look back, I could have done more. And I should have done more. And if I can do more now to help with these issues, with anybody that's struggling, whether again that they be reaching out, or they can listen to a podcast, or have outlets to reach out to. But when you get to a point, and and I talk to I'm obviously not mentioning his name for good reason. I just don't want people to dig into that or whatever. I talked to him about suicide many times, trying to talk him off the ledge, and maybe I should have done more to reach out to specialists to help him. But when you get to the point, it seems like where you're thinking about taking your own life, how do you talk someone out of helping them realize what they do have and what they're giving up. And you look at someone like Jason Hairston for a good example, and he had some TBI issues, but from the outside looking in, had an amazing company, had great people around him, didn't seem to be struggling financially, obviously, because he was doing amazingly well, and took his own life. What was his state of mind at that time? Many other people as well, but friends I know in the military, same thing. Is what do you do, right? What do you say to them? What profound words do you get across to them that, hey, it's not all gone. It's not all lost. There are things worth living for, and helping them understand that. And in my case, what I should have done, I should have gone to Oregon more. I should have hung out with him more. I should have had him come. I should have made him come out here. I would have drug his ass back. I should have done so many more things than I did. And, I feel like shit about that, because now I'm like, fuck, what an asshole I am. I mean, I thought I was helping. I thought talking to him, but it wasn't enough, and I should have done more. And so I'm going to stop rambling on about this, but check your buddies, be a good human, do your best. And if anybody's struggling like that, or if you're struggling and you're listening to this, call me, reach out to me. I've gone through enough shit in my life to where I could probably give you, maybe it may not be good info, but at the very least I'll make you laugh and we can shoot the shit. Life is precious, and I think we take it for granted, and we shouldn't. So this has been a depressing podcast, obviously, but it was worth talking about, and hopefully I'm going to go back in there and get my mind right, spend some alone time, hopefully whack a big bull, and then hopefully have help packing it out. If not, I'll just suck it up and figure it out. But I appreciate all the people that have reached out to me on the podcasts that I have done with mental awareness and all of that stuff. Appreciate all the support in general. With my move to BP, I appreciate all of you. So thank you for tuning in. Sorry this one was kind of depressing, but I think it was worthwhile to bring up. Wish everyone luck for the rest of their season, and congratulate the ones who have been successful. So thanks for tuning in, everyone.